Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Alana. I am joined by, let's see if I get this right, Khalif. Other way around.
Oh,
Greg.
right out of the gate, right out of the gate, you got it wrong.
Wow.
It's very difficult to do this. Okay, it's fine. But we're very excited to be here for episode 1 of the second season of Presence of Mind. Today, we're going to be talking about confronting toxicity, which is a real spicy take. But first, I thought that I'd introduce myself. I'm Alana Pierce. I've been in the video games industry for about 10 years, and I'm on the board of a mental health organization called Checkpoint, which focuses on the positive relationship between video games and mental health. So this is something that I take very, very seriously, but also just like talking about candidly. Khalif, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Khalif Adams. I run the Spawn on Me podcast, the premier podcast spotlighting people of color in the video game industry. I've been doing that for about 8 years, and was really excited to hear that this project was coming up and that we were going to be able to dig into this topic in such a cool way. So excited to be here and excited for all the folks we're going to be talking to throughout the series.
How about you, Greg?
I'm Greg Miller. I've been in the video game industry covering it for 14 years. I do it at Kinda Funny right now, and Kinda Funny's whole mantra, right, is being better to one another. And we call our audience the best friends because we're all trying to be supportive of one another. And my entire 14-year career has been built around trying to think to be a good person and destigmatize the things that people usually don't want to talk about. And so when this came about and we want to talk about mental health, it was obviously a full-blown easy conclusion on my part that I wanted to be a part of it, let alone work with you, Alana, work with you, Khalif.
Oh, the good vibes
I
already
feel like
here.
you beat both of our intros already. You did great there. Great
I'll see you guys
delivery there.
later. That's
Do
it.
you
See
wanna
you
address-
2 weeks for the next
All right,
episode.
and we finished the show. Yeah, which is a great segue into the next point. So for anyone joining us, Presence of Mind will air every other week right here on the Cloud9 Twitch channel. Catch us live Thursdays, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to cover a whole lot of topics, a lot of really different things that we're excited to get into. Going to talk a lot about managing stress, about prioritizing self-care. Again, a focus on positive relationship with mental health and some of the things that surround that, particularly with a focus on the gaming space as the industry that we all love. Before we jump forward to introduce our first guest, I just wanted to address Khalif kind of looks a little blurry because naturally we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so everyone's filming from home, and he took the tech hit.
Don't worry. In the next
It
episode, I'm going to look
happens.
really cute. I'm going to look really cute. It's going to be beautiful. Get to
You still look
see
cute.
all of my baldness in 4K. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, everybody watching when you come back
My
every other week,
doorbell just rang.
you got to keep a scoreboard to see who's that week is having the tech issue. Because if there's one thing we've learned about
Yeah.
podcasting from home, it will always be one of us.
No doubt.
It happens. But we do have a special guest joining us from Cloud9's Valorant White team, Annie Dro. Welcome.
Hey.
What's up?
Yay.
What's up, y'all?
The people in chat already seem pretty excited about you being here. There was, I think,
Got some big fans.
I think these are Annie emotes, is what I'm seeing here. I'm not sure if that's correct, but it's all very cute. So Annie, for us folks who don't work in esports, I'm sure a lot of the people on the Twitch understand what you do. But did you want to explain it to us? What do you do? What's your job?
My job, I play for Cloud9, C9WHITE, which is an all-girls team, and we just compete in the competitive Valorant sphere. We do all-female tournaments, and we also try to, go against the boys as well. So we're looking to just try to see how far we can go and maybe break some stereotypes along the way.
Exciting stuff. We appreciate everyone making waves in that space. It's these things have progress by someone like you starting to do it, or the team starting to do it. So I did want to ask a little bit about how did you start out? How did your career start out?
I guess gaming kind of started out a couple years ago when I started streaming. I was playing like Overwatch and streaming just, in my spare time, just for fun, just like a hobby. Didn't really plan for it to go anywhere. But I ended up just getting a lot of traction, a lot of great people to play with, other streamers to play with, and I ended up building like a really nice community that I don't know, I kept just gaming every day and kind of playing a lot of Overwatch was like the main game until eventually I'd switched over to Valorant when the beta came out. I think like I think it's been like a year now. I think
Yeah.
1 year anniversary.
For you, when did it turn the corner? When did you, I mean, you're doing this for fun. It was just something you're doing on the side. When did you start going, wait a second, like this could be more than just something to kill time?
Um, Definitely it was when I was playing a lot of Valorant and I got like Radiant, which was I guess like top 100 and back in season 1. And to me that kind of like gave me a lot of motivation, like a lot of fire in my soul that like I could be like
That's
a
awesome.
pro player, like a competitor, because I had always wanted to be like some type of competitor in Overwatch. I just felt like maybe Overwatch wasn't the right game for me to do that. So um, I'm glad Valorant came along because I really liked it, and I still do.
I remember, first getting to see some of your work when you were playing Overwatch, and then sitting in the chat and hanging out and watching you play and wreck a whole bunch of folks on the other team and getting wins
Mhm.
there. You talked a little bit about your competitive spirit. I'm curious to hear, like, was that something that you always had as well? Did it always feel like you wanted to kind of, have that competitive juices flowing whenever you kind of played a game in the space?
Um, I would say yeah, honestly. I've been gaming since I was like super little, so
Hmm.
I've basically just kind of like I played competitive games, but I didn't like play it competitively, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Like, but
Sure.
I played like Call of Duty, like as a kid, like I'd play like all the battlefields and I'd have fun and I would just try to like, top frag just on my own. So I always kind of
Mm.
had that like drive that I wanted to, I don't know, be like a menace to play against.
So
I
I
love
guess
it.
like considering your progression, what does it mean to be a member of Cloud9 White?
Honestly, it's like an honor because I feel like a lot of other teams have tried to do like an all girls team, and a lot of them get like negative PR or they
Mm.
just kind of like outright die like a month later just because they're not set up correctly. But there's like no gimmick with our team. It's kind of like we had already been playing for 4 months before like we even got like hit up by any organization. And mainly the point that we started out on was we just wanted to get experience. All of us wanted to be competitive players anyway, even if we weren't a team together, like we would still, we would join co-ed teams later on or something. And so all of us kind of had like a really good mindset going in that this was just for like, experience, like it was for getting better and it's for like being comfortable because sometimes a lot of girls don't really want to like join an all guys team to start in tier 3 or tier 2 because I don't know, there's like a kind of like power dynamic or like I guess like you might not get listened to and it just might kill your motivation kind of thing.
Even though, you were saying
Actually spoke to sorry. We
I
have
swear to
lag.
God. Yeah, just a little bit,
Yeah.
and it's just enough, right? My question was going to be, even though you said you didn't have a gimmick for the team, right? Like a lot of all girls have teams have gimmicks and stuff. Was there concern on your part when you were founding it or getting involved of like, if we do this, people are going to think we have to have a gimmick, or people are only going to think of us that way?
Oh yeah, no, that's inevitable. I feel like with girl teams for a while, but I feel like it's kind of changing. I mean, there's I think like 3 more girl teams that were just announced this week. So, I mean, I feel like the gimmicks are kind of fading away and we're
As they
actually
should.
picking up like teams.
Yeah.
Like people who've played with each
Yeah, I
other
wanted to say
before getting signed is kind of like the big difference. So,
I spoke to a doctor about kind of exactly what you were saying earlier this week, which I found really interesting, is the idea that a lot of the female teams that do get a lot of negative PR are necessary to give women more confidence in the competitive space because they tend to scientifically underperform if they are competing in a male-dominated space. This is like fully documented that there's pressure to perform better because you're afraid of the stigma of being bad because you're a girl, and that pressure makes people play worse. And it's really common with women across the board. So a lot of the ideas behind, obviously you can speak to yours specifically, but a lot of the female teams is to have a more comfortable competitive environment. And a question I'd love to ask is, would your like ideal be that the women's only teams or even women's only tournaments exist, or would it be that they exist until you're integrated into the rest of the esports world more comfortably, or do you think there should always be room for both? Like, where do you see the future of the kind of gendered competitive leagues heading?
honestly, I feel like I'm kind of an advocate for like just kind of like both. experiences because I think it's totally fine to have like women only tournaments and like a women only league in the future wouldn't be like the worst thing. Just because it kind of like inspires talent and it like really gets like a larger pool of like female competitive players that if they wanted to move on, because I would say not even like all women want to move to a co-ed team just because there's a lot more pressure than if they were playing with all girls. Like girls playing with other girls tend to like play better and they tend to like it better because I mean, they just feel like more respected. They feel like they're listened to and they're having fun together. So,
I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, bridging off of that. You know, esports is still fairly new in terms of competitive sport in that way. We see, the WNBA having had almost 10 years under their belt, I think maybe even a little bit more. Are there other, female competitors in other sports that you're also kind of looking to for, you know, uh, inspiration in the spaces where you're playing as well?
I guess there's been like here and there a lot of like I know like there's a couple StarCraft pro players who are women who are really good. Like I know there's a Hearthstone girl who won a couple big tournaments. That was I've like just kind of like heard, and that just kind of like inspires me to be like, oh well, like shit, I need to do something cool. Like I need to like win something big now. So I mean, I definitely feel inspired just by like seeing other women succeed for sure. Absolutely.
Trying to wait and see if anyone's going to speak.
I
No.
know, me
Okay.
too.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
It's a delay, and I'm like,
what's going on?
it happens. It happens. I'm sure we'll iron it out as we go on. But I guess jumping on from there, part of what we wanted to talk about today is specifically like toxicity in the space and confronting toxicity. And I feel like I get asked about this all the time, which I'm sure means you do as well, Annie. About women get all this harassment. How do you deal with it? And I really like to try to find a way to talk about this in a positive way. And I feel like it's very unique in your circumstance because you're in a competitive environment. So, two-part question. Do you think that competitivity breeds a different kind of toxicity in any way? And the second part was like, do you have any advice for how to combat that or how to deal with it?
Oh yeah, no, I feel like no matter what, like super competitive games are always going to be toxic, and it's almost like unpreventable, but it isn't
Mm.
unpunishable. Like we can still punish like cases where being too competitive and turning it into toxicity. Like we can punish that. I don't think it's like we can prevent it as much though because it feels like um like if you take something super seriously and it's super competitive that it's going to be inevitable that you're just going to get angry sometimes and like people are going to get angry at each other like on the same team, people are going to get angry at the enemy team. It's just like the nature of competitiveness.
And I don't think
It's
that's like
true. It's very
exclusive.
frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not exclusive, right, to esports. That's a sport thing. That's an athlete thing, right? People always talk about that. You see people get into scrums on the field or after a play or whatever, and it's the same idea that you're so jacked up trying to go out there, you're trying to win, you're trying to achieve your
Mhm.
goal that, yeah, it's easy to snap at a teammate or obviously turn on the other team.
Yeah, but there's definitely like, you know, places where it goes way too far.
Oh,
Right?
sure.
Um it definitely can like get personal. I think when like it gets like super personal, that's when it becomes less about the game.
Hmm.
Like I'm totally okay with people calling me like bad at the game, but it makes me feel weird when like people like personally attack me or just kind of like I
Now,
guess go after me.
I want to follow up on this. What's interesting is I feel like you started and you're talking about, your team and the other team, the enemies, right? As you said.
Mhm.
Now, are you talking about the audience or are you talking still about other teams and other teams being personal about it too?
I would say like other teams don't really get personal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like okay for like another team to like call me bad, but like I feel like fans get way too involved and they like if like a fan of like an enemy team that like beats us, they like kind of take it to like way too far and they try to personally attack a lot of us and um I mean, I feel like we've been well received on like C9WHITE generally, especially from like a large majority, but we still do just get like personally attacked over a lot of like, nothing
Of
for
course.
really no reason.
I'm curious to
Are
hear
there
your.
any rules
Oh, go
in
ahead.
place to prevent? Oh, sorry. Are there any rules
Heck.
in place to prevent this kind of thing in a lot of esports leagues? Like, are there any I know of some vague things with the way that people are tackling this kind of stuff differently, but like, does C9 have any policies in place to make sure their players are protected from? I guess I agree with the personal attacks. I feel like fun competitive banter, even if it's aggressive, can be enjoyable and can add to an atmosphere sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a line, and I was wondering if there's a line in kind of those rule sets at all.
I don't really think so. I think there, if I were to like read the Riot handbook, I'm sure there's like something about, you can't like personally attack people in some sort of way. But as far as I like know, you can still, teabag them, shoot their body, and like, say like easy in the chat. I don't think there's like any punishment for doing that. And I mean, I think that that's actually like part of the fun. Like I think it like makes like an entertaining like arc,
Yeah.
to be honest. Like I think there's like I don't want to say like toxicity can be healthy, but there's definitely like healthy ways of being like overly competitive and like, taking it out, something like that.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is I feel like there's such a spectrum, and that's one of the things I'm excited over these 12 episodes to get into is the idea of what is, as Alana was talking about, the line, and what is, not healthy competition and healthy banter versus something that is crossing the line and going into it. And so, yeah, teabagging and being in chat like you suck or whatever, like that's different, right? Than I think what you're talking about, which is your performance as an athlete, being then in the chat and seeing another team come in and their fans and talk about how you are terrible at the game. I could do this better.
Like we like lose to their fans, and then they're like, you need to cut this team. Like you need to cut everybody on this team. Like you're awful. You're never gonna have a career. And we do get comments like that pretty much every time we play. By definitely maybe like a dozens of people or even 100 people, and it's kind of just like a constant thing. And like you can say like, oh, just like block it out, just like mentally mute them, But it's like, okay, I mute 100 people, and then the next time we play, there's another 100 people that I just have to go through and block, and it's like I don't have time or energy to do that. Like, I'd rather just like they
feasible.
didn't do that. Like they don't need to.
And I think that's the biggest thing about it, right? And one of the goals of the show and what we're talking about is the idea of addressing the issue and talking about it and dragging it into the light of day. Because I think so many people, and I know I can speak only for myself, but I know Alana and Khalif would be with me on this, of like, you put up a YouTube video, right, and the comments are horrible, or you put up something on Twitter and the comments are horrible, and you respond back to one of those people, and it's always the same thing, right? Of like, oh my God, I never thought you'd see this. I'm having a bad day. I'm so sorry. Yada. And it's that idea that like when you do something like that, when you're on a stage in some way, whether it be playing for Valorant, whether it be making a show, there's this idea that, okay, cool, you're no longer a real person. Like I can come in here and say something because I'm a real person going through my real thing in the chat. I can say whatever I want. And of course, you're on TV for all intents and purposes. You're on the internet. You're making it. You have a great life. I don't need to worry about it. When in reality, we're all people trying to make rent and take care of our family, friends, and dogs. And so you're walking your dog and you look at your Twitter, you're like, oh well, I suck apparently. That's great.
Yeah, exactly.
I find the idea of ignoring the trolls on muting, I've always found that to be really, really frustrating because generally if I reply to someone, it's because it makes me feel better on that one day. Like, there can be 10,000 comments that I ignore, but if I reply to one person, it's because I wanted to at that point in time. And I get more frustrated by people saying, just ignore them, don't talk about it, just block them, move on, than I get by the original comment that I was responding to every time, because it can be really difficult to just openly talk about this stuff or vent about it. So when you're not only told you can't respond to them, but you're also told you're not allowed to talk about the fact that you're not responding to them. You have to just have all of this be silent is so frustrating to me. I'm like, I think we should be able to talk about it. We should be allowed to discuss it if it makes us feel better. If you want to reply to someone and tell them to GTFO, I think you should be allowed to do that. And everyone else should be like, hey, that's okay. I think like creators can even take it too far by insulting their viewers as well. You don't want to go that far. But if I want to tell someone to get out of my chat, and other people are like, just ignore it, I'm like, no. Let me do this. Let me go off on one. Because every now and then you've got to be able to take some ownership of it.
And it makes me think often about the art of the pop-off, right? Which is, we see that in the fighting game community often, where people are, face to face, and they whoever loses or whoever wins, they get that chance to emote in the way that they feel like they best can. Do you feel, Annie, like because of the way that society has kind of made everything so unequal when it comes to the way that folks are able to react to simple things as people saying something terrible to them, and then the differences between how men are treated in that way and women are treated in that way, of how they respond to it. Are you and your teammates kind of talking about, the way you all kind of as a united front have to kind of behave or act because you're in that public space in that ways? Do you feel like there's some big differences there in the way that you all kind of feel like you need to do that, so you kind of give yourself some cover?
I guess that we haven't really like discussed that as a team. I might have discussed it with like one or two players, like just personally,
Mm,
just because like I was a content creator before all of like this, and I kind of like had to slightly be like, yeah, since like since we had a couple people who like hadn't really been content creators, so this is the first time that they're like on TV kind of thing, like they're in the spotlight, and so I tried to like prepare them to be like, okay, you're gonna get a lot of negative criticism, but
mm.
that's inevitable with like everybody on the internet, especially creators. We always are gonna receive negative attention, and it's really easy to like latch onto that because um it's always there and it can easily affect you. Like once you read one negative comment, you have to read all of them. Basically, it's like a
Mm.
negative feedback loop. It's like a spiral. So you just really have to focus on the positive like comments. You have to really like, respond to positive people. You need to like build like this positive energy side of like content creation rather than feeding into like the negative energy because it just makes you play worse. It like makes you feel worse. It just kind of like ruins everything.
I'm curious to hear you talk about what are some strategies that you've kind of learned to bounce back from a strictly just playing perspective. You know how much that
Mm.
energy just
Hmm.
eats at you, and it makes you, like you said, sometimes play worse. What are some of the strategies you've kind of learned over the years to kind of work through that so you can stay at the top of your game?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Um, I just want to preface like there are days where like, I do get sucked into reading negative comments about me and it does ruin my day. So like it's
Mm,
not like a end all, but it's definitely just like if I see a negative comment, I just need to like cut it. Like I just need to like look away and just like maybe even like turn off my phone and just like focus on something else or just like think about it and be like how wrong do you have to be to like actually write this comment, like and I totally agree with like responding to him. Like I totally think you can respond to someone and say, F off. Like if they're being super bad to you, like you have a right to respond to them as a creator. I think there's obviously like a line that it can cross when you like say like, hey, all of my fans, all of my millions of followers on Twitter, go attack this person that I'm
Of
quote
course, yeah.
tweeting. That happens a
Not a
lot.
fan.
With content creation, but I think just replying, with like minimal, um, I guess like minimal spotlight on them, just replying in a very like personal sense, can actually help you as well as I guess like ground you and make you feel a little bit more secure.
The problem, right,
I
is I
think it
feel
can
like it
help
gets
them
to
in
be
some
that.
cases too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
100
Sorry,
percent
we did it
Yeah.
again.
No, it's fine. It's fine. There's justice delay. Go ahead. Yeah, this
I
I
was
can
gonna
help
say,
them
I
too.
think yeah, replying can help them too. Like Greg said before, sometimes they do have people respond to be like, "Oh, I didn't think that you'd reply. I hadn't thought about that."
yeah.
And because they're just like yelling things on the internet trying to get a response from anyone, right? A lot of it's just like trying to get attention. But it's also that I think it humanizes you occasionally if you actually engage with these people and have conversations with them one on one. Because
Mhm.
sometimes people look at you as a follow account rather than as an individual. That's definitely a thing that can happen for anyone who's a public figure. But I did also want to mention, I just asked Gino, who is the child psychiatrist that we have available to us in chat for this show, which is so cool, if he had any insight as to why we focus on negative comments so much. And he said, basically, since we all have our own insecurities, we have cognitive distortions and will selectively pay attention to things that emphasize our insecurities and may miss all the good qualities because our anxiety brain dismisses them. So I guess it's specifically by this theory that the things that you're insecure about that someone mentions are the things that might annoy you the most, which is a thing that tends to ring true of most things we take as attacks. It's like someone can say something really general and you can still take it as an attack if it's something that you're insecure about. And I think that's pretty fascinating too, is the stuff you can learn about yourself by the way that you receive different kinds of comments.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Totally.
what your sore spots are and what your actual things you're hung up on are and how you work through them, right? And that's been, I think we've all talked in the top of the show about how long we've been doing this. And for me personally, that's been the interesting, I guess, timeline or, the run here of runway for me of going from when I first started and somebody would come at me on Twitter and I would quote tweet them and make a whole thing that was very antagonistic, but was also me trying to lead by example of like I always talked about reaching into the troll hole, grabbing the troll and pulling out and be like, we won't stand for this. This isn't what it is, yada yada yada. And that was never a great approach. It was a funny enough approach to deal with people who were being mean and hurting my feelings, right? But over the years, as the follower count, like you were talking about, Alana, grew, and then it did become people wanting to go defend me, and that became, oh, this isn't what I wanted, right? A long time ago, I had to move, and it was a personal choice to never meeting hate with hate, never meeting anger with anger, and doing more of the conversation stuff that you're talking about, Lana, right? Of having a conversation with this person and trying to lead by the example of like, I won't do that here, and I won't engage with you that way. And most days that's just a mute and move on and get away from it. But last year was a wake-up call for me in a lot of different ways that my method of muting and moving on, and somebody's mean in the comments and it's either delete the comment or just mute them or ban them from the channel or whatever platform you're on, didn't work, because then you're still getting it down to the only people who are commenting are the people who are mean, who then think that they're the only people, that they're the majority because they're the only ones there, because they're chasing off the people who want to be positive and don't want to be a part of it. And then you have a guest on, and for a long time we're known as this community that's just great and super positive, but you have a guest on and the only people talking are the people who are really mean, so it looks like they're not there, and I'm not standing up for them because my personal thing for 14 years has been to mute everybody and move on, and it looks like I'm leaving my guests out to dry. And I was like, damn, like this is, I think, something, you talked about a second ago, Annie, of like, none of this is locked in stone. You're talking about like, this is your thing, but you still have those days where you do go the opposite way and you still let a comment get like, this is something that's constantly changing, and you have to embrace that to be part of it right now.
It just changes with your mood. There's no like end all solution for one person on how to deal with toxicity. Like I think anybody who's like looking for like the one single solution that is going to help them, they're never going to find it. It's not real.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Would love to ask though, like if you can be broad to just crap all over what you just said, which is perfect and eloquent. Do you have any advice for women who are getting into the esports space about how to deal with this kind of stuff?
Definitely. A big tip is definitely just build a support group. Get one other girl player who plays the game that you can talk to and vent to. I would vent all the time with one of my friends on the team, and like we wouldn't really like do anything about it, but we would just vent to each other about like anything and everything, about the game, about the people that we played against or something. And it really just kind of helped us like, I guess, decompress and not keep those like feelings inside. Like if I was like, dude, I feel like I'm like becoming the worst person like on the team, like I feel like I'm like failing and shit, and then having that player be like, I kind of felt like that too, but then you're both realizing like, okay, but we're both like we think we think like we're good, so like I guess like we can be good, I guess, individually too. I don't know.
I'm a big fan of
sense?
sending my friends a screenshot of something someone stupid said and then laughing at them rather than getting angry. Just being like, even if they're insulting me, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Send to group thread. And then everyone like has their little bits where they make fun of the screenshot. And I'm like, all right, it's good. We dealt with that one. Let's move on.
That helps a lot. I'm not even gonna lie. It totally works.
That's what our team does. We have a Discord, and whenever there's just like a very wacky comment about us, we'll just post it in the Discord and like laugh at it. Like it's a really good, instead of like taking that negative comment and feeling like really affected by it, like we take it and we make it like, I guess, positive, because we're like all having fun, like witnessing this, like, I guess, disaster of a comment,
I think you're like kind of taking ownership of it.
Yeah, and that's not exclusive, right? I think that's, a great piece of advice for this show is, sharing your insecurities with your friends and peers because they share the exact same thing. I can't tell you, you know, everything we're talking about, whether you're talking about being a esports player and feeling like they're the worst person on the team, you know, doing a show, writing something, being in school, being in a class, and everybody has that exact same fear of imposter syndrome, of not making it, of everybody's looking at them when they're not there and be like, oh my gosh, can you believe that person's here? Like, that's universal. And so sharing that with people you trust and love and respect, like, that is such a great way out of that negative hole of being hung up on the one comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also just feel like. No, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'll follow up.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask. But is tag. The Annie, I was curious because I love the fact you talked about you know building up those support systems with your fellow teammates and friends. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what the support has looked like from Cloud in that way. You know, a lot of times teams get put together, and then sometimes there's not really a thought behind what's going to happen once the team gets made and what is going to happen for the players who are in that space. I would love to hear your thoughts about, you know, how Cloud9 has been supporting you and the rest of the team and getting everything out there and making sure that you're all safe.
Yeah, absolutely. When we won the FTW Showdown, which was like the $50,000 girls tournament, we got hit up by almost like every single org for the Valorant scene. They wanted, you know, they wanted to make a girls team with us, and because they felt like we were really successful. And we ended up choosing Cloud9 just because they did offer a lot of resources. Like, we have, you know, we could get 2 coaches, we could get like a sports psychologist that we could talk to about, like, I guess, like, team affairs, like any frustrations that we have, like,
That's
you
awesome.
know, developing like routines, just kind of like keeping us like healthy mentally and physically, which is, I guess, like, really really appreciated. I'm not sure if we signed with another org, if that would have been like guaranteed for us. So that's really one of the biggest reasons we chose Cloud9 to begin with.
Speaking of that, Cloud9 is partnered with Kaiser Permanente for this show, but also findyourwords.org. You go to findyourwords.org right now. It's Nightbot's been putting in the command, and I mean, that was my promo voice, and they didn't tell me to. But all that aside, it's actually it's an awesome website of suicide prevention resources. But not only it's there if you need it, if you are in crisis, if you want someone to talk to. But there's also a bunch of stuff in there about how to help other people, which I found super helpful because obviously that's something I think we've both been, or I shouldn't say that, most people might, definitely me, have been on both sides of it, where I'm at rock bottom and I need someone, but then also somebody in my circle needs help, and I want to make sure I'm saying the right things or providing the right resources, but I don't know how. But findyourwords.org has all that up there right now.
I think that is a much better place to go to than us. But I will also say, because I didn't really address it at the top of the show, that if anyone has any questions in chat, feel free to ask. I do have chat open, so we can see that. We can pass questions on to Gino, who is our psychiatrist, if you like. So if anyone has any questions about any of this stuff, totally down to chat with you guys. We want the show to be really candid and positive overall. So feel free to ask any questions you have about dealing with this kind of thing, because it does happen to everyone. It's, you know, I feel like the minute that you've been on the internet for, you know, an hour and 1 minute, it's like you've encountered something negative. Doesn't take long. And I think one thing that I'm always really curious about is what the effects of this are going to be long term, in terms of, like, I know when I wake up every day, I'm guaranteed to see a bunch of negative stuff, right? And especially I feel like through the pandemic and lockdown, a lot of people are in really negative spaces. I mean, the past week has been horrific. What's happening with Asian American communities, the increase in hate crimes. Obviously, there was a shooting this week, which is devastating and terrifying and very hard to deal with. And I feel like the constant exposure to all of that as well. I just don't know that our brains are ready for it. I'm not sure that mankind is caught up with social media and the overflow of negative information probably as quickly as those apps are growing. So I always want to advocate for taking breaks. I understand that like sometimes that can feel ignorant and you really want to stay in tune, but I often try not to look at social media until 3-4 p.m. every day, and I feel like it can be really, really healthy and productive for my workday. So huge fan of not being on all the time if you can avoid it, but also a huge fan of utilizing it to talk about things like this if that's a thing that you want to do too. But yeah, I wanted to kind of ask, like, in relation to toxicity in general, how do each of you, I guess we'll start with Khalif, deal with access? Like, do you have a cutoff? Is there a certain line someone can follow before you'll block them? Like, what are your personal like guidelines for like making sure you're okay in this space we aren't all necessarily ready to mentally deal with yet?
You are infinitely smarter than I am because I look at Twitter as soon as I wake up, which is a terrible thing to do. Because I am an
Shouldn't
awful
do it.
human being to myself. It's not great. It's bad. It's bad. It's bad.
I do the same thing. I'm
Yeah,
terrible. And
I'm
it's that
A lot of
thing is
people
I
do.
roll out of
I
bed and I look
highly
at it. I'm
recommend
like,
you
"Ugh."
stop.
I know it's so bad, and then
Don't.
it's funny because it's funny because I didn't necessarily know that it was kind of like messing around with my mood until very very recently, and that part was pretty profound. It was a thing where I was like, wow, this is like ruining the start of my day, so that not even in a productivity way, just because I'm a pretty nice person. Like I'm pretty chill for most of the time that I'm, doing
Pretty
whatever I'm doing.
nice.
I'm decent. I'm okay. I'm all right. After 8 p.m., I'm an evil human being. But it's one of those things where now I'm learning that, like, yeah, like you said, taking that break and not necessarily jumping into that app as soon as you kind of wake up to check the, the quote unquote news for what that stuff is. For me, um, it takes a lot for me to block you on Twitter. I as a person who is always kind of, wanted to use logic in a way in an illogical space with illogical people in an illogical world, I still fight that often enough where I still am trying to go into it with the intentions of finding the best in people and trying to figure out good means to build bridges even with people who are extremely mean to me, which is probably not as reasonable as most people would think it would be. But I've been able to at least, and this is again person for me, is I've been able to have some okay conversations with people who have called me the worst things on the planet, and knowing that that is not a reflection of me. At first, I know that those things, when those people are throwing whatever nonsensical things that they're have in the back of their pocket about me, about how I look, about my blackness, about all that kind of stuff, that most times it's not about me, and it's about them and the problems that they're having within themselves. And going at those conversations from that standpoint gives me more grace for them. Because at the end of the day, I
Mm.
know I have a fairly good life. I have a wonderful family. I'm lucky enough to be doing the thing that I've always wanted to do. So for that part of the equation, I'm in a good spot. I'm just like, hey, whoever pooped in your cookies, it's not my fault. I didn't have anything to do with that, and you need to figure that out for yourself. So it takes a lot at that point to kind of get to that point where I need to block people. But I tell people all the time that, if you feel like you need to just peace out on a conversation because you can see that it's going to turn in a way that is just not useful, your mental state is the most important part. Whatever you can do to keep yourself safe mentally, physically, and emotionally, do whatever you need to do, because that at the end of the day, you can't help anybody else if you're not in a good spot yourself first. So that's me for the most part when it comes to dealing with the online space and how do I kind of navigate that stuff. But I'm curious to hear, how you two have been doing that, especially because you have so many more folks who are talking to you all the time on the internet, and so many different versions of those conversations that you're having. I'm curious, Greg, what are you kind of learned over the years of doing this work at this space?
For me personally, like, I feel like I've been around long enough, and I've existed in our space, which is obviously completely different from esports and everything else, long enough that, like, you have your mind made up about me, and you should know by now what the things that make me tick are in terms of trying to be a good person and trying to be positive. And I'm very much I very much believe what you put out, you get back. And so, like, that's why I made that choice a long time ago to be positive on the internet to people. I'll tell games suck all the time, but, like, you know what I mean? To be, like, in terms of interacting with people and building a community to do that. And so when I do get the errant person who comes in, swinging from left field in my mentions because they think they're going to get a rise out of me, it's just a mute and move on. Like, I haven't blocked anyone in years because blocking, I feel, makes them think they won. They know that I saw it. They know they got under my skin, and they know they matter in some way to me. Whereas the mute I love because you are in the phantom zone. You are banging on the glass as you tumble out into space, and I don't hear you, and you think you're making a point, but you still can't get a rise out of me. And so that's my personal method on how to deal with it, right? And then there'll be the days where, I'll host an EA play and I'm trending and I look at the trends and it's, oh man, this Greg Miller guy sucks. Why is he yelling all the time? And it's the same thing there of being introduced to a new audience. That's a different ball of wax. And I will give people more leeway and I will give people a conversation if they actually are trying to engage. If they're just insulting my teeth or whatever, then I'm out of here. I don't need to deal with it. But it is trying to build that bridge in the same way you're talking about, Khalif. Because again, way back to my point from before of like the amount of people, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Like that's what I've learned. It's what you're saying. That people are going through their own thing and they often take it out on you for some other reason. And it is that idea of like, this review he did sucks. I can't believe it. And it's like it's clear that person probably has a job they don't like or something going on in their life that they're not happy about in the day to day. So the fact that I'm living my dream and doing it semi-successfully is annoying to them in that moment, right? But it's not really about me. And it is that trade-off and it is that thing. And like to Alana's initial question, I think a lot of it is knowing your triggers and knowing what will set you off. And there are those days where for me, it's going to open Reddit and I'm like, you know what? Not today. And it's not, and not even that, especially like the Kind of Funny subreddit, not that it's going to be antagonistic, but I'm the kind of person running a business that when I see a question answered or see somebody upset about a choice we made, I can't walk away from it. It will be that I sit there for an hour and craft the response and proofread and delete and ask Tim a question on Slack. And it'll be on a Saturday. And I know I'm ignoring my wife. I know I'm burning some of the few actual hours of free time we have together. And I just can't do that. I've done that enough. And there'll be the emergency break glass moments where I have to, but I have to know when to compartmentalize that and put that aside.
Alana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my approach to blocking is really similar. So like, I guess it varies depending on who you are, but I only have 400 people blocked on Twitter, which from my perspective, considering the amount of people who speak to me every day, is a very small amount.
Yeah.
But I do have some rules for it, which is sometimes I'll do it if I think it's funny. And that's very specific to me at the time. If I'm like, this is going to make me laugh blocking this person. And I will do that sometimes. And that is usually if I've found like some like thread where someone's saying negative stuff about me and I see that people who are following me are responding to it and sharing it. But they didn't really say anything mean themselves necessarily. I'll be like, you think you can follow me and get away with this behavior? Get out of here. And I find that very funny. But the more common way that I do it is if I feel like someone is consistently riling up people in my community is how I most often choose to block. So I won't block someone for just attacking me. Usually I won't even see it. My mentions are extremely filtered, so I generally have no idea that that's even happening. But if someone is like replying to multiple people under something I've tweeted to argue with them, I will get rid of those people because I'm like, you're stinking up the place. You're walking in my house and you're putting your crap on the walls. No one else wants to be here when you're smearing your crap on the walls, so get out of here. So that is my most common approach. And I do think the concept of trying to logically talk to some of these people, sometimes I do want to do that. I tried doing that the other day. Like I distinctly remember being like, you are harassing this person and it's not me. It was this user who's just targeted harassment at someone else. And I was like, just please think about how much of your life you're wasting. Just please think about the waste of time and what you could be doing that would make you feel better, that wouldn't make you feel this negative. Like, just consider that for yourself. I didn't even really address what they were saying or try to argue with them. I was like, please just think about what you're doing. And it works like 50% of the time. But like Khalif, to the way you spoke about it, I feel like it's a big responsibility to take. Like taking on other people in that way when they're strangers who are just coming to get angry at you can be really tough sometimes. Like I feel like
stories.
Yeah. I feel like half the time when that happens, someone will be like, I'm glad you mentioned this. I am going to go talk to my wife and kids. This is my bad. And they'll own up to it. But then the other half the time, it just gets worse. And I'm like, I don't know how much I can try overall, because I do think you really just have to kind of prioritize yourself in the end.
Yeah, really quickly, I'll just add, it's one of those conversations that my wife and I have often, and this is before we moved from New York out to the West Coast. She would often come home from a long day of work, and I usually got home before she did. And gaming is my pastime. It's the thing I used to de-stress and calm down. And she would walk in on me, and she was like, "Are you talking to racists again?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, we're talking to racists again because it's the only way I feel like I can get past that layer of stuff." And usually we'd wind up having a good conversation and wind up they of course they're not changing their minds, but at least I believe in for the record. For the record for me is a thing that I believe in. And it doesn't mean I'm trying to change your mind. It doesn't mean I'm trying to get you on my side. But I think the truth needs to be out there all the time. So for me, that's a blessing and a curse for me in that way. But Annie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts too, because now that you're getting kind of more spotlight in the space, you and the rest of the team, how are you kind of thinking about, how you're maneuvering in online spaces and especially in social media too?
Um, Definitely I just try to ignore a lot of comments. I think um for communities that I'm like building, I have a pretty low tolerance for toxicity, to be honest.
Mm,
Like if you're gonna say anything negative about me or like any of my teammates or anybody in chat, I'm just gonna ban you from my Twitch. Like I
mm,
really don't need you. Um, like I care so much more about like a good community, like a good chat, a lot more than I care about one extra viewer in my stream.
Exactly.
Because that one person, if I tried to keep them, it would just drive away 10 good people. And I think that's a big thing that streamers kind of fall into the trap of is, they try to, prioritize viewership over a community. And what ends up happening is it's like self-griefing yourself because all the good people don't want to be a part of a toxic community. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean,
um,
you nail it. That's such a huge part of it, right? And we've been talking so
mhm,
much about Twitter. Twitch and the chat is a completely different story. Of you gotta get the
Same
weeds
as
out
YouTube, like
immediately,
you said
otherwise,
before,
what's the
Greg.
point? Yeah,
and
Yeah,
for
like
other
with
social
YouTube,
media,
if they, sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, for like other social media, I think like um I just try to check like the profile. If they don't even follow me, then I don't really care. Like I just kind of like ignore comments. But
Same.
a lot of the time I find people just like follow me to like comment on everything that I do. And
mm.
if I see that they just like constantly comment negative things towards like other people too, that's just a block. Like I just block and move
Hmm.
on, you know. I feel like you can't
I feel like I should do that more often. I don't do a
logically
lot of
talk to
profile checking.
people who attack a lot of people,
Yeah.
I guess.
I am careful with YouTube comments in that kind of to what Greg was saying before. If something is written with the intent of insulting me or someone I work with, then I will generally just hide them. Because that changes everyone else.
Mm.
And that can make everyone else in your community focus on that. And I feel like that's probably a big part of the reason why us three specifically are doing this show and why we're having a guest like you, Annie, is I don't think any of the people on this show would ever prioritize viewership over like a positive community. There's just no way. My biggest thing on Twitch is always like I just wish my chat wouldn't acknowledge the bad people. Mods, of course, really helpful to like point them out. But I'm like, otherwise, if we can all just ignore them and pretend they don't exist and just move on with the good vibes, I feel way better about that. Just like pretend they aren't there. We'll ban them. We'll get rid of them. We'll move on from that. And I think that fosters a healthy community, which can be really important when you are dealing with negativity, to remind you that those positive people really are there. Like when you get a bunch of hate in a really small amount of time, but you still have this small community that you can go to where you can feel confident and you can feel like these people do want to just be positive, I feel like is just so rewarding and definitely really important to kind of try to foster from the ground up for sure.
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, you figure like when we left IGN to start Kind of Funny, that first stream, that's what we talked about, right? And it was that
Mm.
like, listen, if you're gonna come here and you're gonna be a racist, you're gonna be a bigot, you're gonna be an asshole. We don't want you. I don't want your Patreon money. I don't want your Twitch sub. I don't want your YouTube sub. And it was exchanging the reach of IGN, which had millions of people, and a lot of them were jerks. I shouldn't even say that. A lot of the vocal people were jerks, right? In
Mm.
comments and stuff like that, for the intimacy of Kind of Funny and being a group that would sit there and say like, no, we don't want you if you're going to be around. And I think a big part of that goes back to something I learned a long time ago on Twitter, where one of the final time I ever quote tweeted somebody and really was like, look at this asshole, everybody. A person responded, was like, hey, it sucks that you get this, but for every one of these comments, I have to imagine you get at least 100 or 10 or whatever it was, positive ones. And all of those people would kill for a response from you. So
Mm.
you're going to, if
Mm.
you go and respond to the bad people you're going to get more bad comment. And it was like, oh, that's right. And it's exactly what you're talking about, Alana, of like, like all of this, everybody who wants to be a jerk and be a troll and be toxic on the internet is a fire. And if you starve it of oxygen, it goes away. If they see they're not getting a rise out of you, they move on.
I think there's a little bit of nuance there in that toxic comments will exist no matter what. So
Of
like
course.
Right.
people can be like, well, if you just change this, you won't get toxic comments. Hard disagree. They will continue to exist virtually no matter what you do. And I think, I feel like that's always been prevalent for all of the women that I've worked with. I imagine you can relate to this, Annie. Is like, no matter what you do, someone's always going to tell you look bad. Like, it doesn't matter. You're ugly no matter what. Like, there's no like, well, if you changed this, then maybe they wouldn't. No, it happens 100% of the time for women. Like, definitely. I'm sure men get it to a lesser extent as well. But I've always been really anti-quote tweet, to the extent I didn't even know you had a history of doing that, Greg. That my issue with people using the quote tweet mechanic, called it a mechanic, can you tell I'm a game dev? Is
tell me about the gameplay loop of Twitter.
It just pushes the negativity onto everyone's feeds. I'm like, I don't need to see this fight you got in with this person. Can you just deal with that in your own room? Like, can we try to put more positive stuff on the timeline? And 100%. I'm not consistent with that. I always try to figure out if I feel negatively about something, how to frame it more positively. But this week I tweeted about victim blaming when rape is concerned, and then the excessive amounts of sympathy that we keep giving mass shooters by saying, oh, he had a bad day. And those are two really negative things to tweet about that I just felt like I needed to say something about. But for the most part, I'm like, I don't want to quote tweet an argument, because I feel like it does is serve me. I don't think it helps any of the people who are following me other than give them more negativity. Can we just not retweet things that annoy us, not share things that annoy us unless we have something productive to say about them? Or if you just want to have a conversation with the person who is annoying you or is being toxic one-on-one, I feel like it's so much smarter. And this is very subjective. I'm sure there are correct ways to deal with it that aren't mine. But I just feel like it's so much healthier not to make everyone else have to see the turd. Yeah, you don't have to look at it.
And to your point, Alana, I don't think you should beat yourself up about, sharing the stuff you shared this past week. Because I think toxicity and negativity and then the frivolous negativity that of quote somebody's mean to me, I get told I'm ugly all the time. Don't worry, I'm a big uggo and I know it. Me quote tweeting somebody coming at me for that.
Teeth.
I got these horrible teeth, these choppers.
I didn't notice
quote tweeting that is one thing, and then is like, why would you do that? Why drag that into the feed? But talking about an injustice, trying to stand up for your friends, trying to show your audience like, hey, I'm not okay with this. It's so many things where, again, last year was a learning curve on that. Every day is a learning curve. But I mean, last year was a learning experience for me of oh, people are interpreting my silence as me not caring, when in reality I'm silent because I was in the same boat for so many of these issues of well, yeah, that sucks, and I'd rather be entertaining and help you get through the day rather than remind you of that. But when I'm not reminding you of it, people are like, well, Greg doesn't care about this issue. Or worse than that, Greg isn't on the right side of history on this issue, which we put a quick stop to, right? But it's that, give and take.
Yeah, I found it really interesting in terms of the quote tweet stuff too, where I get that question or I get that response a lot as well towards me, because I sometimes will retweet stuff about people, again, being super racist or, things around white supremacy, all those kinds of conversation. And people are like, well, Khalif, why do you share that out on your timeline? You seem so positive. And I was like, well, I also am educating people who don't know. I have a whole bunch of people on my feed who absolutely get it. But with the more kind of eyes that I wind up getting on me, there are lots of people who, one, don't know me, and a lot of people who, two, don't understand the actual issue. So it's been nice to be able to feel like some of that work is helping in doing that space. But I totally rock with you a lot on that side. It was sometimes you're just like, man, you really didn't need to share that version out, because everybody's going to jump on it and everybody else is going to get super, super mad. I believe in not playing mad tag. Mad tag is not great. But it's one of those things that sometimes it has a use if you're paying attention to it and thinking about it.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I think
definitely agree. There are ways to utilize it.
Exactly. And the examples you're talking about, Ka, are so great, because that is how you, and again, last year and everything else of so many of us, everybody's caught up in their daily lives. And so when you don't know what's happening on somebody else's side of the screen, there's no way for you to know unless that experience is shared, right? And so in the early days, that's what I thought I was doing, of quote tweeting somebody being mean, telling me to suck a tailpipe because they didn't like my IGN review, right? It's look what I have to put up with. But then to actually hear the stories of what my friends have to go through, right? In a way that I never would have thought, that actually motivates you, and it gives you a horse in the race, and it reminds you that whatever issue we're talking about, you are not as far into the future as we thought we were.
It's absolutely true. It can be easy to live in a bubble where you pretend this stuff doesn't exist. And I guess to that point, Annie, is there anything that you feel like would be valuable to highlight about the esports scene that the three of us might not know about?
What do you mean?
Just like anything in general that you feel like is something um that you feel would be productive to talk about where it comes to toxicity in general. Like your answer can be no. But if there's anything that's like most people don't know this about the
Um,
space, here's the thing I would like people to know.
It just kind of feels like every other content creation space, to be honest.
Mm.
Esports is just like almost content creation in itself. Like, it's just kind of like sports. I don't know.
I guess I'll
That's
back
fair.
I'll back up that question with another question because I think this is
Okay.
interesting too. Is we talked a little bit about this earlier in the show. Is with you being on the first team like this, and now seeing other teams kind of come out more recently. Do you
Mhm.
feel like there's a space now for your specific team to maybe have even a little bit more pressure in that space to be able not only to perform super well, but to be ambassadors for the space too?
Definitely. There's a little bit of pressure. I think overall it could be good though. I think more like women teams actually can like relieve pressure from us, especially if we are performing well.
Mm.
It feels weird to say, but they'll probably get like more hate than we would
Mm.
at a certain point, and so we would get less pressure from that, which isn't good. Like, I mean, I don't want people to just go hate on other women teams because I kind of touched on it before, but the more women teams that we have in the space, um, the more competitive it gets overall. Like we're just gonna get more competitive women players into the scene. Um, and one of the biggest drawbacks of esports a lot of the time is that there isn't a big pool of girl players to choose from. So we're starting to like build that pool, which I think is just always going to inevitably do more good than bad. So
For sure. We are almost at time, so I guess I wanted to ask, um, does anyone have any kind of closing thoughts or extra anecdotes that they really wanted to bring up here? Greg, you got anything else you'd like to share?
No, I mean, this has been great. I think this is such an amazing first episode. Remember, we're doing this every other week. And I think, Andy, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to bring on other people's perspectives and talk about this stuff. Because, again, the whole hook and, the reason I wanted to do this is because we don't talk about this stuff enough. And so I love the idea of a show that is here every other week to talk about actual issues we're all facing and that I know the chat is facing and I know the viewer is facing. That's so powerful. And sharing is what it's all about. Like, don't be afraid to share your feelings with people.
mm-hmm.
I just
Agreed.
want Andy. I
Khalif?
just want Andy to sign my mouse pad whenever she becomes a champion, and
I
and,
will.
and wrecks all
I'll do
these
it.
folks. I can be like, I knew Annie when. I knew.
I guess I wanted to ask Annie for your closing thoughts. Is like, we've spoken a ton about toxicity here, and it's definitely something that I feel like I get asked about as a woman all the time. Is like, can you speak to how you are harassed? So I would love to hear like what's one of your favorite things about you do, like what you do. What's one of the highlights? What's one of the things that other women trying to get into space should be excited about?
Um, there's nothing better than like I guess like playing with other girls and like doing like a scrim or a game where we just completely like dumpster another like team that's like really reputable. Like because it just feels like we just like shatter the glass ceiling above us, you know. Like it doesn't happen every time, but when it does happen, it just like it feels super, super good. It just feels like months of effort have like paid off for like a moment. And I don't know. I really like that. I really like esports just for those kind of moments.
Do you have any particular moments that you feel like things that people could look up? Like anything that's like a particular game that you're really proud of that we could go see the highlights of?
Probably like the Ignition series tournament. There was a lot of great games that were streamed. But other than that, we've been kind of like playing a lot of like teams off stream just because we kind of like want to hide our stuff, just so we don't get like scouted and everything.
That's
But
fair.
there's
I
going
guess
to be
Stealth
upcoming
mode.
tournaments. I think we start qualifiers tomorrow for another girls tournament, and then the main event should be next week. So
Awesome.
That's very exciting. Yeah. Good luck and thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a great episode. I did want to add a couple of extra notes that we have from our psychiatrist here. A friendly reminder that if you need it, the National Suicide Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. Do not be afraid to ask for help. It's super important. It doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. Everybody needs help. And he also mentioned here, based on a conversation we were having a little bit ago, that research would agree that limiting our use of social media leads to improvement in depression and anxiety symptoms. So I'm a big advocate for it. Not saying bury your head in the sand. Of course, a lot of us need it for work, etc. But I do think just take breaks where you can. It's like a fresh of breath air to get out of that negative space sometimes. So that would be my closing thoughts. Make sure that you follow Cloud9's social channels for details on our next episode and learn more about the Presence of Mind initiative by visiting cloud9.gg/presence of mind. It's been a really fun show. We're doing it for a whole lot longer. If you catch us every second week, we'll be at 5:30 right here, Thursdays, 5:30 Pacific time, streaming for an hour, talking about a whole bunch of different stuff. And just remember that the first step in improving your total health starts with prioritizing your mental health. If you are interested in learning more, head on over to findyourwords.org. It's a great place where you can find a bunch of different mental health resources, which are very important to just know about, to have more awareness of yourself and how you can improve yourself in general. And I think that's everything. Thank you guys all so much for joining us. I'm Alana. I am joined by, of course, Annie, Khalif, and Greg. And we'll see you on our next episode.